Like many of their crimson and yellow ochre kindred prowling the streets of Fari, these Akrani, who were so amused by the indignities being heaped upon one of their hosts imprisoned in the stocks, wore a splash of purple dye in their shrub-like beards, which signified that they had completed the Akrani test of manly virtue, the trial of the Korakatik. This ordeal took its name from the desert that separated Akran Major from Akran Minor. Purple dye in a man's beard meant that he had crossed the Korakatik, or barren waste, on foot. The distance was 200 miles north to south, if you kept to a direct line as the crow flies. Not that any crows or any other birds flew over the Korakatik. There was nothing to eat in that scorched earth, for nothing could live in the heat. A great many young Akrani bucks made the attempt to walk across every year, weighed down with large water bottles and joking to their friends about how once they had trekked the length of the arid wilderness under the boiling sun, they would immediately turn around and run back. But they knew that the long walk across the barren waste was not really a joking matter. Those able to tow a straight line for 200 miles mostly lived through the trial, but about 1 in every 5 didn't survive it because they strayed to east or to west, and the Korakatik was 500 miles of death from side to side. Almost all of the mob around the stocks wore the purple, and the contempt that such men of proven worth felt for the mewling, self-effacing poltroons of Gathkaris was a tangible odour of violent disgust that hung in the air like the blade of a guillotine. "These are not guests," murmured Ealdred to himself. "When the landlord gives away his dwelling to the lodger, the guest has become the owner, and the dispossessed is but a servant in what was once his own house." Ig gave the Englian a pained look, as if to say, "Can we please leave at once?" She found it very hard to endure the burden of having to witness so intense a level of craven cowardice and self-abasement. She had fallen into the habit of referring to the wretched Gathkari men as Dikabiri, the castrated. Her opinion of them was, if anything, even lower than the derisive hatred that the Akrani felt for them. Under Ig's code of conduct, any man who permitted others to express scorn toward him and did nothing to revenge himself should commit suicide as soon as possible. Women, too. For any person to remain alive under the taunts of disdain and ridicule was a fate worse than death. Throughout her own long months of agony as the slave of the Chevniks, she would have ended herself in an instant if she had ever had a single opportunity to do so. Life without dignity should not be lived. Ig shook her head in wonder that there could be men anywhere upon the earth who would bear to tolerate the insolent mockery of others, when it was so much easier just to kill their enemies, or to kill themselves. But then Ig knew nothing of the religious policies that ruled in matriarchal Gathkar, nor would she have been able to make any sense of such an ideology if it had been explained to her. The outlandish-looking couple on the enormous roan horse had moved some way off from the scene at the stocks, and had reached the other side of the harbour square, when a lively shout of delighted discovery told them that Ig had been noticed. In a trice, 4 uniformed members of the group of Akrani soldiers were sauntering over towards the odd pair, with the undoubted intention of accosting them. The Akrani soldiery felt themselves kings in this land of inferiors, and why shouldn't they filch the sexily exotic oriental wench if they took a fancy to her? For all their wine-soaked good humour, Ealdred did not mistake the very real danger they represented. It was a situation that called for delicate judgment. If he were to kill, quickly and decisively, those 4 who were even now approaching, would their comrades-in-arms by the stocks run to support them, or hold back, dissuaded by the threat to their own life and limb? It was a gamble which he calculated had to be taken. If the 4 drunkards got close enough to lay hands upon the girl, the fight would not be immediately decisive, and a skirmish would encourage their comrades-in-arms to take a hand in the matter, he felt sure. Only a devastating lethality would suffice, a shocking demonstration of human mortality that would stop them in their tracks. Ealdred slid down off Hengustia and demanded one of the Talitzim swords from Ige. She placed it in his hand so instantaneously that she might have read his mind. He told her, in English, to remain in the saddle, and only her profound respect for him enabled her to comply. It was not her way to sit idle when her loved ones were in jeopardy. As he turned to confront the threat presented by the 4 soldiers, he did not grip the sword in the normal way, but drew it back as if it were a javelin, and in just that way he threw it. The man who was his target had no more anticipated such a tactic than he had imagined that the big horse might sprout wings and fly away. Nor did he have the least idea of what a spearman of the Paega, that clan of the Englians into which Ealdred had been born, and the heritage of which flowed with the blood in his veins, could do with a thrown missile. Despite the curve in the sword, it flew straight and true, the briefest of silver flashes over the distance between the spearman and his target, before burying itself almost to the hilt in the Akrani's stomach with a frighteningly disemboweling impact. Consternation and outrage erupted amongst the other 3, and behind them a few heads turned to see what was happening on the other side of the square. The reaction of the remaining 3 was predictable. Their indignation and desire for revenge would make them rush forward at a sprint. But Ealdred already had the second sword poised at his shoulder, and then it was loosed, blinding as a bowshot, and incredibly a second man lay dead, with a sword delivered through his body from a range of 40 feet. The laughing, jeering mob over by the stocks were silenced, as if all their vocal cords had been severed with a single cut of a knife. That an individual man could rally so terminal a defence sent its message loud and clear. To approach this man was death. How many more swords did he have in his armory to kill his enemies before they could get within a dozen yards of him? Disloyally leaving the 2 Akrani who had been slain lying where they had fallen, the other pair withdrew to their regimental compatriots, judging wisely that the admittedly very tempting erotic appeal of the slant-eyed young woman was none the less insufficient to take the risk of dying for. Ealdred had won his wager. Ige was sorry to lose her lovely new swords, but Ealdred was glad to be rid of them. The sword was not his weapon of choice. All the same, it had turned out to be a lucky thing that Ige had kept them.